great to be here today. And yeah, we'll be talking about level up with GitHub Copilot. Who has tried GitHub Copilot in the room? A few people? Fantastic. Hopefully I can give you some pointers and tips on some new things you might know about GitHub Copilot and also set the scene for those who may not have used GitHub Copilot before. So I'm Michelle Manners, as we heard from our wonderful MC Greg. I work on the developer advocate team at GitHub. I usually have all these wonderful stickers with me as well, but because of my 9-hour delay in Dubai, I did not even get a chance to collect any of my luggage. So all my stickers are in my luggage, so I don't have stickers for you today, sorry. You can follow GitHub on every social media platform known to man, and you can also follow myself as well. So today, what are we going to cover? We've only got 25 minutes, so we'll fly through a few things. We're going to talk a little bit about AI and what it actually is before we go on to talk about some of the applications of AI, as well as talking about what is GitHub Copilot, for those who may not have used it. GitHub Copilot Chat, which is like the new, fun, exciting stage of GitHub Copilot. And then also a little bit about, like, will AI actually take our jobs? Because that's, one of the hot questions everyone's asking about right now. So what is AI? If you Google an image of AI or type into Google, what is AI, you'll probably come up with images like this on your Google image search. This idea of a big neural network brain type thing. So I started an AI company back in 2016, and that was when it wasn't cool, and everyone's like, oh, what's this AI stuff you're doing? And then other people would come up to me and go, oh, I have an AI startup too. And I was like, sweet, tell me all about what you're doing. I want to know all about your AI startup. They'd start telling me, and I'm like, okay, cool. You have a glorified search engine. That's what you have. You don't have any AI whatsoever. So it is a little bit of a buzzword and a bit of a hot topic, but true AI is all so encompassing. You might have seen those big diagrams with the circles, this is machine learning and AI and deep learning and all these other kinds of things. I encourage you to go look it up. I don't have time to explain all the levels of AI today, but this is what I like to talk about, and this is what I kind of gravitate with when I look at AI and the definition of AI. This is a great definition from IBM, and this definition from IBM really encompasses what artificial intelligence actually is and what it's trying to do. So leveraging computers and machines to mimic the problem-solving and decision-making capabilities of the human mind. Now that's also where everyone's a little bit worried, right? Oh, AI is going to take our jobs because, well, clearly from the definition of AI, they're trying to mimic us as humans, right? So that's why people get a little bit worried. And I have a few friends outside the tech world, and a lot of them ask me, and I talk to them about this kind of stuff all the time, AI and GitHub Copilot and ChatGPT and all these other kind of things. And they say to me, oh, it's kind of a bit like Jarvis, this whole thing, isn't it? And I was like, yes, Jarvis is an artificial intelligence system created by Tony Stark, and I always get asked the question from my non-tech friends, how far are we away from actually having Jarvis? And when I first started talking about GitHub Copilot and ChatGPT about 6 months ago, I'd be like, oh, the actual capabilities of Jarvis, and the whole hello, Mr. Stark, how are you going? Your plane is about to leave in 5 minutes and you'll be delayed in Dubai for 9 hours. So you might want to plan about that. That area of AI already exists. Those capabilities are already there. It's just not commercially available. And about 6 months ago, when I was, again, giving this talk for the first time, I would have said, we also don't have the humanoid version of Jarvis. About a month ago, the creators of ChatGPT, so OpenAI, they put ChatGPT 5, which is the latest AI large language system they've come up with, they put that system into a physical form, into a physical robot. And so now we basically have Jarvis. So when it's actually commercially available, I'm not sure, but we actually do have Jarvis now in existence. But most of you have AI already in your phones, probably in your computers. Who's got an Apple phone? Yes, hey Siri, I'm more on the Samsung side, so Cortana and Alexa. These are versions of AI that we might be used to. Something like Google Nest, where the actual camera recognizes people within the house, it learns, can alert you to strangers. That's another one. Driver assist, Subaru. I know for those car fanatics in the room might have picked out that's a Mustang. The Subaru driver assistance artificial intelligence system that helps you stay on the roads. Anyone got a new Subaru? Kind of basically you don't have to drive it. That system is in a lot of other cars too, and that's artificial intelligence at play. Artwork. This was a big contentious topic when this came out last year. Well, not came out, but when it became kind of big last year. And in fact, an artificially intelligent recreation of a photo won the New York Art Prize for photography. And they didn't realize it was not an actual photo until they looked into it. So things like Midjourney and DALL-E are starting to become quite large too. Who's used an AI to write articles or any kind of writing recently? About 2 or 3 years ago, something came out called Article Fiesta or AI Fiesta, which was trained on like 80 million lines or 80 million articles available on the internet. And as a journalist, I find that a little bit scary. But this was available about 3 years ago. You could, use an AI to write articles for you. And now we all have ChatGPT, which is obviously one of the biggest. So who's used ChatGPT in the room? It's pretty much everyone had it. Yeah, okay. Who hasn't used it? A couple of people haven't used it. I'd encourage you to actually go and use it. It's quite interesting, right? Like some of the things you're able to do with it. Here I was sitting in a talk and someone was like, hey, we need that abstract for your talk like right now. I'm like, I'm in another talk right now, so I'm just gonna ChatGPT this and send it off to you. I changed it and did a few things, but it's really good for doing like quite simple things like this. Programming, who's used AI in programming? Obviously, we have GitHub Copilot, but before GitHub Copilot, there's an article which I've linked to in my resources, the top 10 artificial intelligence programs you can use for programming. There's heaps of them. A lot of them are built into VS Code if you use VS Code. But there are a lot of different programming things out there that allow you to program easier and better. But the one I want to talk about is GitHub Copilot, because I'm from GitHub and GitHub Copilot is actually insanely awesome. So this GitHub Copilot is not autocomplete. So some people think that some of these AI systems are trying to predict what we're going to say, or so ChatGPT is predicting what we're trying to write, and GitHub Copilot is predicting the text. It's not about reducing the number of keystrokes here. This is about synthesizing code that is specific for you. So what do we mean by that? This is a quick example of it here. We call this ghost text. So the person's written constant fetch NASA picture of the day, and then GitHub Copilot has written the rest of the code using ghost text there. So the way it works, and this was the early version of GitHub Copilot, the new version uses a slightly different codex. We use the OpenAI codex model. So OpenAI are the team that built ChatGPT. So the ChatGPT was built on the OpenAI codex model, which was trained on hundreds of thousands of lines of natural language. So what we did is we used that codex model. We got all the public code available on the internet. That's not just all the code available on GitHub, that's all the public code available on the internet. That's what GitHub Copilot was trained on, which is insane if you think about how much code that is. So then we allow it to be used within your IDE. So if you're using VS Code, if you're using IntelliJ, JetBrains, any of those kind of things, GitHub Copilot is built into your IDE so you don't have to leave and go and do something else and go into another application to be able to code. So that's the version of Copilot that a lot of people have access to, and that's the one that we're using. And what we call this is we call this pair programming. We don't say, off you go, you don't have to come to work now, just get the AI to do all your work for you. This is pair programming. Has anyone done pair programming with a developer before? Fantastic. How many times have you thought, though, man, I really wish that developer was in the office today, or that they weren't on holidays and I could go and call them and get them to help me and there's no other people in the office? GitHub Copilot is now there for you. So you're able to pair program and think about GitHub Copilot's been trained on all the public code available on the internet. You are basically pair programming with all the world's developers and the knowledge of all the world's developers, which I think is really, really cool. So being able to pair program like that is awesome. But let's actually see a little bit of an action. This is on the website, you can go see that anytime, but here's a few things that I've done. So the first thing you'll need to do if you're using GitHub Copilot is to actually install it. Who uses VS Code? All my VS Code people out? Yeah. I like VS Code, it's one of my favorite ones, but if you're using another IDE, you can install it in a similar manner, but you go to the extensions, you install it directly from your editor, and once you've got it installed, you can authenticate down there with GitHub, and then you are able to use GitHub Copilot. So GitHub Copilot is really good for helping you with programming. Now, I was doing some live Twitch streams. I like to live program. I'm not a fantastic developer. I'm not a developer by background. I've done a lot recently, and I did a few subjects at uni, but I was doing this JavaScript programming challenge or competition. You didn't actually win anything, so it's not like I was cheating. But I was like, I've forgotten where to even start with JavaScript. And I was sitting on the stream going, And then I went, light bulb, I have GitHub Copilot. So I turned on GitHub Copilot, and I wrote some parameters. So up there, I've obviously given it some context to work with. And I've written some parameters for what I need to do for this challenge. So the challenge was reverse a sentence. And when I first tried it and just said reverse a sentence, it gave me a one-line answer for reversing a sentence. I'm like, well, that's not exactly what I want. Delete that and go back. So what I've done is I gave it more context. So the start of the new sentence had to be capital. No other part of the sentence needed to be capital unless it was a name of a person or place. And the end of the sentence must contain all the punctuation marks that the original sentence made. You can see what I'm doing here is, GitHub Copilot is suggesting me some things. So that typing in there is me, but when I click to enter a new line, GitHub Copilot suggests things for me. So if I go here and I start typing, so I give it some context by providing it, and again, it's trying to, for one of it, like about predict what I'm trying to write, but then it's providing me with some of the code. And it's even like providing the comments as well. So GitHub Copilot doesn't just do the code side of the things. It does the comments too. And someone said, why would you need to comment your own code? You should definitely know what's going on. And I was like, how often have you used someone else's code? Yeah? And gone, I have no idea what the heck this person has done, and they've got no comments in the code. So GitHub Copilot can help you write the comments as well. So I think now everyone should actually be a lot better at be able to share their code with others, because it's actually readable, because I can look at the comments here. And I like that too. GitHub Copilot's giving me all the punctuation. I remember typing that in for the first time and went, what? I don't even remember half those things are punctuation marks. It would take me half an hour to write them all out. But GitHub Copilot does it for me. So you can see here what I'm doing is not just coding with GitHub Copilot, but it's actually making it much easier. Now I know there's a few bugs in here. Some people have called it out, like, there's some bugs in the code. I'm like, yeah, we can get to that later. But you can see GitHub Copilot's actually providing me a lot of the information here. And the one that I struggled with the most was the very, very last thing, putting it all together and making sure it all worked. And I remember one of my senior developer friends on my Twitch stream said, or put in chat, I sent you a Discord message with the answer for the code. And I was like, cool, thank you. And then I was looking at his thing and then looking at GitHub Copilot and looking at his and looking at GitHub Copilot and went, they're exactly the same. So GitHub is pretty much as good as a senior developer. So you can see here it's giving me the final comment there and providing me basically the answer, which I think is really cool. So well done, GitHub Copilot. Well, what's interesting is, does anyone know about Instagram, a little company called Instagram? Yeah, so the co-founder of Instagram said this about GitHub Copilot when it was first launched. So we launched GitHub Copilot before ChatGPT did, November 2021. And Mike said this about said this about GitHub Copilot, which is it's the single most mind-blowing application of machine learning he'd ever seen at the time. Now, I don't know if he's still saying that, but when we first launched it was pretty mind-blowing, blew a few people's minds. I also love this one from a senior developer saying he will never code without GitHub Copilot again. So we thought this was pretty cool. Now, some people say to me, well, why don't you do all these demos live? And I was like, well, because GitHub Copilot learns. And when I was on my Twitch stream, I went back to show somebody, they're like, oh, what have you done on this stream? I'm like, oh, look, we did all this. I'll show you what GitHub Copilot, it learnt the whole thing. So it already remembered what the function was that I was trying to create, and it's written exactly what it had given me before, because it learns. So it learns within the context and within the session that I'm using. So that's one of the reasons why I don't do it live. Now, a lot of people ask me, well, you've just showed us a JavaScript. What kind of languages can GitHub Copilot do? Python, Java, JavaScript, Go, Ruby, and TypeScript. It is really good at those languages. Now, if you look at the top languages on the internet, programming languages, that's what they are. But basically, GitHub Copilot can do any language that exists on the internet. It's just better at those other ones because there's obviously more data to train it on, because Python and Java and JavaScript are like the most common programming languages. So it makes sense that the GitHub Copilot is able to do those better. So who's heard of GitHub Copilot Chat? Couple of people? Awesome. So we launched GitHub Copilot Chat sometime this year, and it basically is a chat-like interface, kind of a bit like ChatGPT, but it now allows me to go into GitHub Copilot and actually ask it to explain functions. So now I can actually start learning a bit more. So now it's not always 100% correct, right? There's a few examples last week, and it kind of gave me a slightly wrong answer. So you do have to fact check things. You do have to check things as a senior developer. And the other thing, someone said to me, oh, I don't even bother about checking my code anymore. I just ship whatever GitHub Copilot does, and if it's wrong, I just blame GitHub Copilot. Like, you can't do that. GitHub Copilot is an AI. You're the person. Like, you are still in charge. You are still responsible for the code you ship, even if you write it with GitHub Copilot, which means you do need to actually check the code that's actually going out. You can't just, leave it to the AIs. But this is a great one, being able to explain the code on screen. Another one is you can basically create whole functions or whole applications. So I just asked here, can you help me create a Space Invaders game? Now I've got a really good link in the resources to our CEO who built the Snake game, the old Snake game on your phone. He built that live on stage at Web Summit Rio in 15 minutes, and then everyone in the crowd played it. So you can do some pretty amazing things with GitHub Copilot. And what I like about this too is it doesn't just go, oh yes, let's just start creating a game. It asks me questions. It said, okay, well, do you have requirements for this game? What language would you like to write it in? And then it starts writing me the code for it. And if it's code that I want, I can literally just select that code and insert it wherever my cursor is, which is really cool. I can also get it to do things like this, I want to add light and dark mode toggle to my website, help me do this. So I got engaged 3 weeks ago, and I've been using GitHub Copilot to build the website for my wedding. And so I've been, asking it to help me do all these kind of things, which is great. One thing I will say about it is GitHub Copilot is all about context. So when I asked GitHub Copilot, what are the requirements for RSVPs for a wedding? GitHub Copilot went, oh, sorry, I'm only here for coding questions. I can't help you with that. And I was like, okay, that doesn't matter. But as soon as I asked GitHub Copilot, what should I put on the RSVP page for my wedding website, it went, oh, you need to put this about guests and about kids and about dietaries and all these kind of things. So as soon as GitHub Copilot has context that you're building an application, or in this case, a website, it will provide you all that information, even though it says it's only here for coding. So again, context is really important here. So if you haven't tried GitHub Copilot is free for 60 days for anyone to try. GitHub Copilot Chat is available in public beta, so you can go onto the website and go onto the waitlist, and I'll put the resources up. So you can try it if you'd like GitHub Copilot Chat. But if you haven't tried GitHub Copilot, I would highly encourage you to try it. We've also launched GitHub Copilot for Business, which means that anything that you send, any responses that go out for GitHub Copilot and any responses coming in never hits disk. So if you're working within an organization, worry about the model sending back information for training. If you're using GitHub Copilot for Business, none of that ever goes out. So that's why a lot of people are using GitHub Copilot for Business. But this is where a lot of people get worried. Well, are the robots going to take my job? Now, obviously, I've mentioned a couple of things about, you are still responsible for the code. But what we did is we thought, well, why leave everything up to chance? Why don't we do a research study and actually see how effective and efficient GitHub Copilot is? And granted, this is when we first launched GitHub Copilot, so some of the numbers would have changed a little bit now. But what we did is we recruited 95 developers, professional developers, mind you, which means they're actually working within the tech industry. We split them randomly into 2 groups, and we gave them the task of writing a web server in JavaScript. And what we did, those 2 groups, we gave half of them GitHub Copilot, and the other half were not allowed to use GitHub Copilot. And so what we found was the group that used GitHub Copilot, 78% of them completed the task within a rough amount of time. And then the group that didn't use GitHub Copilot, only 70% of them actually completed the task. Now I look at that and go, oh, 8%, is that really that much of a difference? Like, sure, it's some of them aren't going to complete it, but maybe with a bit more time, they probably would have completed it. So that number for me isn't like the real goal here, right? But this is what is really interesting, is the time taken to actually complete the task. So of the people that actually completed the task, those who used GitHub Copilot did it in an hour and 11 minutes. And those who didn't use GitHub Copilot, 2 hours and 47 minutes, or 41 minutes, sorry. I can think of a lot more things I would rather do in my day with an extra hour and a half. So the time is a big thing here at GitHub Copilot, is it's saving a lot of time from doing that mundane, repetitive code. But again, we thought, well, should we just leave the research study there? I mean, what if that hour and 10 minutes might be faster, but what if it's really boring? What if you're just sitting there going tab, accept, yep, whatever you say, GitHub Copilot. Yeah, this is fun. I'll just use that Get Bird from the Homer Simpson one and just do this thing. Right? So we thought, well, are people actually enjoying using GitHub Copilot? And it turns out they really were. So this is one of the people from the research study, and I love this. I have to think less, which is, from all the mundane, repetitive code, and the stuff that I have to think about, it's actually the really fun stuff. And it sets off that little spark that makes coding more fun and efficient. Now, that for me says amazing. And GitHub Copilot Chat is taking this to the next level. Who likes writing unit tests or tests for their code? Okay, a few people. Okay, you can still keep doing that. Anyone else who doesn't like writing tests for their code? Not everyone likes writing tests for their code, right? So GitHub Copilot can help you write a lot of tests. Who likes finding bugs in their code? Who doesn't like finding bugs in their code and sitting there spending hours? GitHub Copilot can help you do that too, GitHub Copilot Chat. So I think this is really great that people are actually really enjoying working with GitHub Copilot. And this one too is basically using GitHub, because some of them were, they were professional developers, but they weren't all JavaScript developers. So being able to use GitHub Copilot to help you code in a language that's unfamiliar is like having a Google Translator, which I think is also really cool. So since we launched GitHub Copilot, there are lots and lots of people using it around the world. So we have over 1 million developers using it. These numbers are slightly old now. So over 1 million developers using GitHub Copilot. 75% more fulfilled. That's that feeling better about doing your job and coding and having things be more fun. 55% faster is that from that research study that I showed you. This one's interesting. 46% of the code committed to the internet now is written by an AI. Think about that for a minute. 46%, almost half of the code going to the internet now is written by an AI, whether it's GitHub Copilot or others. And this one, we have over 5,000 businesses now using GitHub Copilot with that GitHub Copilot for Business. So ensuring that all their code doesn't go out there and their public secrets. All right, so resources. All the things I mentioned, the research study, the sign up for GitHub Copilot Chat if you want to jump into the public beta, to sign up for GitHub Copilot if you want to try it for free for 60 days. There's also some great articles there on some more of that prompt engineering around getting GitHub Copilot to give you the answers you're actually looking for and not just, splitting out something and hoping that you're gonna get it. So I'll put that up on Twitter as well. And then we don't really have time for questions, but I also know I'm between you and beer, so feel free to come and ask a question during beer time. Or you can also message me on one of the several social media platforms known to man. I'm also really confused about whether I should, or perplexed about whether I should change the Twitter logo to an X logo. But I think I'll just leave it at Twitter. Everyone knows what I'm talking about. All right, thank you all for having me, and enjoy your beer time. And yeah, kia ora, New Zealand. Thanks, everyone.